Mama.
You old timers will know where that came from, so maybe you young ones
the
won't.
movie we just watched.
And these are movies. Excuse me, while I lose my throat and it turns to Beetlejuice or something. These are movies that we've talked about doing. Some of them we just did an American Werewolf in London. Tonight we're doing another one, and there's another one after this. But these are movies that we've talked about at one time or another, and I'm glad that we're able to compile them into one nice big lump sum for you, the audience. Thank you for joining us for Fright Month. And away we go with this week's classic horror film. And this was a pick from Scott, wasn't it? No. Oh, I think we lost Scott. So.
Oh, he got
me. Sorry. It's coming back. I got it.
It was a friendly suggestion.
Malfunction. 1 second.
We are experiencing technical difficulties. Please.
I think he's making angry face. I knew. If
You bastard.
What
you got me. You got me.
That does not have math. Joe knows me all too well.
Okay, so hopefully this will make it into our YouTube promo for this episode. Scott faked the funk. There's no technical difficulties. He whipped out the machete. He whipped out the hockey mask in celebration of what's this week's film, Scott? Because it's your pick.
Friday the 13th.
I like how that knife is
please address me as Jason.
Well, whatever. Jason / Scott / whatever. It's nice to meet you, Jason. That makes you our second official guest star, I guess.
By the way, I liked how that camera blurred the knife. So
the knife, yeah. So no, it'll get by the sensors. It's perfect.
So very PG appropriate.
And let me say, I must appreciate that your mask.
It is a real machete, by the way.
Okay.
I should put it down before I hurt myself.
Damn, Joe.
Is it
I
really?
guess we better watch what we say.
It is. It's 100% a real machete.
We better agree with him on this movie, I guess, for this week.
That's my home protection.
I was going to say, I truly appreciate, Jason, that your mask perfectly matches your How Good Was It t-shirt. So
I was going to say.
Yes, you coordinated.
Exactly.
Jason is color coordinated. But yes, we are here for the second half of our Friday the 13th episode. We have watched this film. If you will allow me a little bit of a recap, though, and I thank Scott for reminding me this. Every episode of How Good Was It is a potential first episode for someone else, right? I take it for granted as I introduce the show that our listeners know what the hell we're doing, our format, our premise, et cetera, et cetera. And for those who don't, it may be the first time you're tuning in. The premise of our show is as follows. We break each episode into two halves. Our first half is basically choosing a movie. One of us will pick a movie, and it'll be a movie usually from our deep past. Like I'm talking about like 70s, 80s, 90s, whatever the case may be. And we go in our first half to recollect and see what we remember from memory without watching the movie in question. These are movies that we may not have watched for decades. So memories tend to be hazy up in this piece, but we pause to watch the movie and we come back for our second half. And that's when we compare and see what we got right, what we got wrong. And most importantly, how does the film still hold up? Does it still hold up? Or, as I tend to say a lot of times, does it suck? So let's go into Friday the 13th. Are we going to just jump into the plot? Or do you guys want to, discuss anything before?
I mean, you guys say movie. This is my life story, okay? This is really the story of my mother and her love for me. But I mean, yeah, if you want to call it a movie, this is a documentary to me, okay?
I am seeing Scott in a whole different light right now. You are terrifying the shit out of me, buddy. Oh boy. Joe, please save me, man. I don't know what to say right now.
Save Mary.
Good point. Poor Mary. She's like stuck in the closet in parts or something. Like what's going on over there? Anyway, go ahead, Scott. I'm sorry.
Oh no, I was going to break down this lovely movie for us. So I really don't think, I think we were talking about this before we record. there's not a lot to this movie. I think we pretty much nailed the plot in the first half, and we spent like 2 minutes discussing the plot in the first half. It was, it's a summer camp, and people are dying. And could it be my mom? I don't know.
I did forget most of this movie.
So it's so who wants it? You did forget most of this movie. Okay, I got to take the mask off because it's hard to talk to this thing. I don't know how Jason did all this killing with his mask on.
Well, he wasn't talking, so he would just,
Well,
welcome back,
Scott comes back and stops scaring the shit out of me. I guess. Do you want me to get into the plot? You want me to start off?
I'll save it for my final review. The mask can come back on.
Awesome.
Well, sure. I mean, so what? So yeah, I watched like a fool, like I always do. Is I go above and beyond for the podcast. So I watched part 2 as well. I watched it this morning, and I watched half of part 3 because I wanted to see Jason introduced for real, the Jason we all know and love. And he's really not till 3 we get the conventional Jason. Part 2, Jason is wearing a burlap sack on his head. He is killing everybody, but he is wearing a sack on his head. He's not wearing his hockey mask. He doesn't get that till halfway through part 3. So in part 2, the beginning of it, you see basically about the last 10 minutes of part 1. You see, mom introduced, you see mom die, and you see Jason, you see the end of the film. And then in part 3, you see the end of part 2. So it's they're a strange lot. I'll tell you this, part 2 is pretty good. Part 2 and part 3 were definitely better than this movie.
Okay. Now you mentioned
that's it. How good was it? Oh no.
Okay. Sorry. You mentioned
podcast over.
You mentioned the mom who was basically the fiend in the first movie for the most part.
Yes.
Right? Now I gotta say, man, she was the best part of this movie. The mom, man,
she was I guess, a pretty well-known actress.
Was she?
And she was very reluctant to do the part. But what I don't understand with this movie is they don't introduce her till the last 20 minutes of the film. Why is she not kind of around the camp and telling the story earlier and not acting, make a surprise? She just comes out of nowhere and goes right into the killer phrase. I just don't understand why she's not introduced. She's introduced in the last 15 minutes.
It did feel like an afterthought. Movie. Yeah, like they forgot. Like, wait a minute, we need a killer.
The mom is the killer instead of like, you only get like 5 seconds of her, pretending like she's going to help the girl, and then next thing you know, she's a psychopath.
Though I gotta say, they saved the best for last though, because her scenes.
For sure.
Oh my God, it was like the whole thing about this movie is we forget, right? It's very easy to compare it to all the films, the slasher type films that have come afterwards. But this was one of the first. This set the premise for the whole slasher genre.
Yeah. I think it's stealing from Halloween, and it's stealing from Psycho for sure. All the POV shots in this this movie, that's for sure a Hitchcock thing. And
even elements of things like Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
For sure. Yeah, that's what part 2 steals from. Jason kind of looks like Leatherface in part 2.
Oh, really? Oh, I got to revisit.
And there's a chainsaw involved in it as well in part 2.
Well, there you go. But still, I mean, that being the case, there weren't many slasher films back then still. So this kind of set the premise, I would say, more for the 80s, what came after it, for the 80s type horror slasher films.
The summer camp.
Yes.
Murdering kind of thing. There's a lot of copycats after this.
Oh yeah. Kids getting into trouble, as soon as you saw, kids getting, frisky with each other, you knew they were going to be gone within the next 10 minutes.
Well,